Hello everyone, welcome back to the third lecture of this course. In this lecture, we will discuss the anatomy of the engineered prompt, which is the main part of this course. But let's start by analyzing the different elements of the prompt. First, we have the basic elements, which consist of initiation, verbs, and data input. Then, we have specifiers, which tell the generative model how you want the structure of the output to be. It's important to note that these are just classified names of different elements that are mostly ambiguous in their category in reality. This breakdown is just a way to think about a prompt. Prompt generation and engineering are more of a way of thinking, and we will discuss this in later lectures. Now, let's go over the basic elements of the prompt. The initiation is the element that tells the model what you're trying to achieve. You can input the industry, question, theme, key points, context, and more. An example of the initiation parameter of a prompt is to tell it to act as a certain profession, like act as a doctor and explain some disease, or act as a psychologist and explain the possible mental issues for students studying abroad, etc. To give you an example, I once needed an explanation for some classification parameter values. In the chat, I used the initiation parameter as the underlying statement and set the tone of what I wanted the model to do. I instructed it to act as a statistician or a data analyst and supplied the data and results. We'll discuss more about the data later. Next are the verbs. These are the actions you want the model to take, such as analyzing, connecting, creating, finding, mastering, etc. Here, I asked ChatGPT to explain something to me, the verb being explain. An important thing to note in this prompt is the last sentence I used. Do not begin the response immediately. If you have any questions, ask me before you start. We will discuss the importance of this later, but for now, please keep this in mind. In the group of the basic elements, the next one is the data. When working with data, it's important to explain it to the best of your abilities. You need to specify what's in the columns, rows, and what each value represents in the matrix. Since you can't supply the data to ChatGPT, you must do a good job of explaining it because the model can't see the data. If you're working with code, it's even more important to explain the data well, or you may run into problems when executing the code. When explaining the data, you should list all of the columns in the data frame. For example, here is a listing of a TSV, a tab separated values file, columns from Airbnb. This is a copy-paste example of Python's pandas data frame. We'll now move on to specifiers. Specifiers are the words, adjectives, or nouns that tell the model what you want the output to be like. The first of the group of specifiers is the output format. It's crucial to specify the output format you want because otherwise the model doesn't know what you're looking for. Some of the examples that I regularly use are code block, cover letter, HTML, Markdown, table, etc. To provide an example, let's say you want to write a motivational letter for a job application. The output must be specified clearly. Another example would be to write a 3 to 4 sentence biography about your passion for web development as if you were writing it yourself. In this case, you're setting the tone and the output format. Always be very clear and concise about your output format. Let's move on to the output tone. This is particularly relevant if you're working on an artistic endeavor such as writing. There are a variety of output tones to choose from, and the following is just a limited list. This is an example prompt for a text or book chapter. This is a well-structured prompt because it's specific and concise in its directions. You're setting the tone for the response and you're specifying the word count as well as emphasizing the character's emotions. Moving on to target audience. If you're writing something for a special audience, make sure to include that in your prompt. Some examples of target audiences include the adventurous buyer, the busy buyer, cautious shopper, deal seeker, etc. By specifying the audience, you can tailor your output to their interests and preferences. Here is an example prompt. Explain genomics to me as if I were a 5-year-old. This example is short and not particularly optimized, but it conveys the idea of specifying the target audience. Temporal specifiers are specifications related to the time or writing style. I don't typically use them, but they might include directions like describe it as if it were the 1800s, write as if you were living in the time of the dinosaurs, etc. Lastly, we have the scope and the constraints. The scope specifies what to include in the prompt, while the constraint specify what to exclude or how much to include. To define the scope, you might say focus on this or include this. To define constraints, you might use statements such as exclude or do not mention. To summarize, the basic elements of a prompt give the overall direction for the response, while the specifiers guide the output in a particular direction. Make sure that you create practice prompts with this model to gain experience with this way of thinking and to have this as a second nature. In reality, this is just a simplified model of how to construct complex sentences, and it's not very natural to force your ideas to fit in this mold of thinking. That's why in the next lecture, we will focus on developing a mindset that makes prompt writing and optimization more intuitive so that you don't have to be constantly remembering and categorizing every element of your prompt. See you there.